I just want to make sure on that one, because it was really a very hard light. Oh, that's way better. That's way better. Okay. Reverend Henderson, take 2.
Alrighty, I'd like to tell you about this historical piece of property known as the Historical Michigan Street Baptist Church. It started in 1832 when there was a congregant of about 13 families of black that belonged to the white First Baptist Church on Washington Street. They came to the pastor and said they wanted a place of their own, and so they parted on a friendly tone. And the first place that they worshiped was at the corner of West Eagle and Franklin Street over a mortician shop. And the pastor, I believe his name was Monroe at the time, sent out his deacons and trustees to scout the city for a place that he thought would be suitable. And they located this spot here on now known as Michigan Avenue, went back to the pastor. Now the pastor went to England because, as we know in history, England abolished slavery before the United States of America. And he went to England hoping to get money, finances for the benefit of the building of the church. And he came back with nothing. It was the women of the church who, with quilting and different teas and programs, they raised the money to buy this piece of property, which back in that day was, 1836, was about $3,000, which is a lot of money back then. And after purchasing the land, the women got together again and they began to raise finances or programs to raise finances to buy the material. Thank God the pastor happened to be a brick mason, so that cut the cost of building. And with the help of the free blacks and many of the runaway freedom seekers, this church was built. This is the original site. This is not a piece of property with a signage on it that says this was the site. This is the place where history was made. Now this congregation, when it formed, took a verbal stand against the enslavement of any human life, regardless to color, ethnic background, cultural background, religious background. They took a stand that no man should enslave another man. And so with that, the church became known as a place that housed those runaways, those freedom seekers that were getting or seeking entrance into Canada. For Canada had abolished slavery before the United States of America. And as they came this way, knowing that the church had taken this open stand against the enslavement of human life, this was a place as a refuge. This was a place that was known where they would help those that were seeking freedom. Now this church was completed in 1845 was when the cornerstone was laid, and it has been a church ever since. And may I say before I go any further, it is my endeavor and my desire that this stays a place of worship and not as a museum where people can come and see artifacts only.
Great.
All right, this place is known as a place of freedom, and the runaways, the freedom seekers, would come into this place to seek a place of refuge. Now the building was, the cornerstone was laid in 1845, and from then, knowing that we had taken a stand against slavery, they would come here. Now, when the slaves came here, they were in bad shape. Remember, they had been walking through swampland, through thickets for weeks, even sometime a couple of months before they arrived at this place. And so their skin had been torn, by the thickets. Their clothes were raggedy. They were hungry and emaciated. Nothing but skin and bones, many of them. And they came here. And the church served, as we call today in our society, a place like hospice, where we took care of the sick and the wounded and the needy. We fed the hungry. We sheltered the homeless until they could find a place of refuge over in Canada. Now what made this so precarious was that in 1850, the president of these United States of America, who happened to be from the Buffalo, New York, Millard Fillmore, signed in 1850 a bill, the anti-fugitive slave law, which said anyone who saw a runaway, anyone who's a runaway knocked at their door, then they were to return them to the master. But remember, the church had taken a stand that we would not, under any circumstances, return. Now, this bill left an open target for bounty hunters. And the bounty hunters, before they could begin to hunt for the fugitives, they had to go to the city court and get papers signed and sealed by the judge of the court, who happened to be Judge Ambrose. And Judge Ambrose had an extreme hatred for bounty hunters. And so he would stall them for hours and maybe overnight until he could find someone he could trust to bring a message to the church. And the message would read, if you have any runaways, if you have any fugitives, send them out to the neighbors that are friendly to the slave movement. I'm about to issue papers to the bounty hunters. And so we would send those slaves that were able, well-bodied enough, out into the neighbors to find a place of security. Now, there were some slaves that were too sick. We could not get rid of them. We could not send them no place. We still had to do some more work on them. And so we have a place that we have preserved in the basement of the church where the fugitives could hide until it was safe. At night, a cart would be drawn up to the door, and then we would load them on this cart, cover them over with canvas as though we were moving material, and take them down to West Ferry and Niagara Street, where a ferry would be waiting, which was friendly to the movement. Now, many times, the slaves, all of them did not come from across central New York State. Some of them came up through Pennsylvania, and when they got to Lake Erie, they would follow the lake because they were told, follow the North Star and the waterway. And when they got to Lake Erie, they would come through the south towns and all until they got here into Buffalo. Those that were coming from central New York, from Rochester, they would meet with the abolitionist Frederick Douglass, who told them that if you don't see any blacks on the street, stop at the grocery store and ask where is the black church. Now that grocery store was run by one of our venerated priests, Father Monsignor Nelson Baker's father, and he would direct them around here to the church. But now remember, the law was passed, and it said that any fugitive, any runaway that was found had to be returned to the master. So what was going to happen? And as we say in our language, by the way of the grapevine, word got out, don't go to the Michigan Street Church because bounty hunters are here. And so they would not come here. But there was a group of Americans, Native Americans. In my day, we would call them Indians. That would meet with these runaways, these freedom seekers that were coming up from the south in through Pennsylvania. And they turned to these runaways, follow the hunting trails, which the bounty hunters knew nothing about. And so many of our black brothers and sisters never made it here to Buffalo. They stayed with the American natives. They intermarried with there and made residence there on the reservation with the American native. Also, when we got to Broderick Park, as we call it today, West Ferry and Niagara Street, the launching place of the ferry, sometime the ferry had already disembarked and was going across into Canada. And so who would come to the foreplay but our American brethren, Native Americans? And they would take them across on rowboats, canoes, rafts. In the wintertime, when the ice had frozen over, many of the slaves would endanger themselves and walk across that ice in order to get to safety. Now, many of the slaves would come and they would mesh in with the congregation so nobody would know who was who, and they stayed here and made residence right here in the city of Buffalo. Too bad that we don't have any written documents to document these things. This is all oral history. And when the bounty hunters came, they would come to the church with the U.S. Marshal, and you would hear them knock at the door. Open up, U.S. Marshal, bounty hunters. We're looking for fugitives. And when they came here, they found nobody. Thank God. Because if they had, I would not be here in this sanctuary telling you this blessed story of history, because they would have torn this place down. The pastor would have been in prison, and then he would have to pay a heavy fine. Now, after the slave period, the church plays another important role in the early civil rights movement. And the two notable people that we would like to mention, or maybe three, maybe four, are Reverend Dr. J. Edward Nash, who was the pastor here from 1892 until 1953, served here for 61 years. And another notable person was the secretary of the church, Mary Talbot. She and her husband, William Talbot, hosted the Niagara movement, the first meeting, which was about 27 men. And they met in her home, which was 2 doors from the church. And that first year, there were no women that could join the Niagara movement. A notable character of that movement was W.B. Du Bois, who was the first black man to receive his PhD from Harvard University. And he was gun-ho on the black man receiving full rights. Now, he did not want any more delays. And he was in a sort of a conflict with Booker T. Washington, who said, as long as the finger is on the hand, let's not press the issue too much. It is still part of the hand. And Du Bois said, no, we want full rights, and we want them now. And so there was a conflict. 1905 was the first convention of what was known as the Niagara movement, which preceded of what we now have as NAACP. Reverend Nash also was instrumental in bringing the Urban League into existence here in the city of Buffalo. He also was instrumental in getting studies that were not offered to the black students in the public school system into play. And also, Mary Talbot was very instrumental in going through the country, getting a bill together to bring to Congress called the anti-lynching law. And she got it as far as Congress. Congress never passed on it, but she did a terrific work. When the Pan American Exposition was here in Buffalo, Mary Talbot noticed a display, a mural of the accomplishment of the black. And all it showed was native people from Africa with their little native garments on, dancing and the spears in their hand. And this was the white man's interpretation of the black man's accomplishment. And she was appalled by this. She went over to France and she saw another mural that showed the accomplishment of the black man, and she brought it back to America. They never put it on the Midway. They put it in another house where it was not so noticeable. But she was very instrumental in bringing to the attention of the American people the lynching of black man for no apparent reasons whatsoever. They did not have to have committed any crime. But some of the white men having a party, beer blast, whatever you want to call it, they wanted some amusement, and they thought amusement would be killing a black man, stringing him from the tree. And Mary has said, something must be done about this. And so we see that the early civil rights movement started here in Buffalo, something that many, many people do not even realize. And so I trust that with this short presentation that you have learned something about this church. And our desire is that this church remains a part of the historical setting that it was built for a sanctuary. We want to bring it back to its national glory and let our generations, after I'm long gone, will remember this is a place where freedom was won. The purpose and the reason why I am so adamant about this place remaining a sanctuary, and the slogan of our sanctuary is the place where slaves are yet made free. Those that are enslaved to immorality, into drugs, into alcohol, or whatever has them in bondage. These doors are open, and the grace of God is here to make men free. And I want this place to remain a place where people can come in and find freedom, find relief, find a serenity, find a peace of mind and peace of spirit, even as they sit in this place. For many times I come up into this place when I'm worried, when I'm troubled, and I sit in the sanctuary, and it's so quiet and so peaceful. I can even relax and sometimes get a good nod for 15 or 20 minutes. So it is very vital. And I need people's help in order to help me to keep this place. We will put artifacts and things that are admittable to a museum down in the basement area, as we have already done, and we want to increase that. But we want to keep this place sacred as it was meant to be. I hope that suits you.
I think that's good.
I hope they hear my heart cry. May I add to this that in the year of 1974, I happened to know the congregation that was here. I had ministered to them many times, run many meetings here, and so I was very friendly and noticeable to this congregation. And I had made a call to buy another place or to see about another place. And when I made that call, I found out that the congregation that was in this place had already made their advance into that place. And I was told, contact that congregation and perhaps you can get that building. Well, I know nothing about real estate, but I felt led of the Lord that I should come here. And I don't know what other people think of me or or think of it, but I believe that it was divine providence, divine order, that I should come into this place. Because this place was slated for the Wreckers Ball, that they might build some nice modern kind of a sanctuary. But the original sanctuary found a suitable place. And Macedonia came in and worshipped here for some years. And then I came along and I said, I want this place. I told them what I wanted it for. I did not know really the significance of what I was getting into. But the pastor, Reverend Merriweather, at that time said to me, now, Reverend, you could be able to get some money to fix this place because they're going to designate it as an historical piece of property. And so the first Sunday in May, we entered into this building not knowing the real physical condition of this plant. It was in deplorable condition, and I had not seen it. I knew nothing about real estate, so what was I going to do? But I felt that God wanted me to have it. I made my proposal to the church, to the board, and they dismissed me. And 3 o'clock that afternoon, it happened to be on a Saturday, the deacon called me and said, Reverend, don't tell you anything, but you are going to have the church. And that Sunday morning, the deacons came in and they gave me the keys and so forth and so on. And this is where we started. Now looking over the place, I said, we only have a small congregation, Lord. Where am I going to get the money to do all of the damage that has been done to this place? Because the previous congregation had done nothing to keep this physical plant in similitude of order. It was leaking, the roof was leaking, the back roof had leaked several until the preparation room behind the baptistry was mildewy and it had an awful smell of dampness. And I said, oh God, if I had known this, I would have never endeavored to buy a place like this. But God. We appealed for many people's help. The political help. The political machinery of the city. They could fix every other building. They could do every other thing. But black history did not come into their being. They did not see the significance. Even I am over 70 years of age, been in this city, and I've seen all the valuable black property just torn down with the thought of urban renewal. And nothing was done for over a quarter of a century. We put in for grants, we put in for help. And even, I must say, that the city of Buffalo, in their political machinery, has done nothing to really help us revitalize this place. We have several grants from the state, but we needed money, bridge loan, and nobody has come to our refuge. Work was begun and we had to put a stop issue on the work, but we're believing God that now things are beginning to come to the forefront. People are beginning to see, their eyes are opening. They're seeing the significance of this place. For as I tell people, this church is not only a monument to black history, it's the history of the city of Buffalo. It is also the history of the United States of America. And we need to preserve this place. We need people that have a heart similar to my heart, that want to see this place thrive, that want to see this place brought back to its national glory, that people can come in from far and wide. We have people come in here. We've had them come in from Germany. We had them come in from Russia, come in from Japan and France and far out California, Texas, Florida, and all around. And they know more about the significance of this place. And our black brothers and sisters walked right by this place and they said, I didn't even know this place existed. And so this is part of what we want. When the political machinery does not want to help, we know that God has help from another source. And we're believing and looking to Him that His help is on the way.